I bought a used car from my daughter-in-law's mother, but the GPS had a saved address named Residence. I just figured she forgot to erase it. Curious, I drove there. The road led to a lookout point on the mountain. An old man was waiting for me. He looked me in the eyes and said something that would change my life forever. But before we get to that moment, I need to tell you who I was. Because the woman who went up that mountain was not the same one who came down. My name is Elda. I'm 63 years old, and for the last 5 years, I've been a shadow of myself. I don't know when I stopped living exactly. Maybe it was the day I buried my husband, or maybe it was later when I realized the house stayed silent even when I was screaming on the inside. The truth is, it doesn't matter when it started. What matters is that it reached a point where waking up and going to bed felt exactly the same. Empty, automatic, meaningless. My days were all identical. I'd get up at 6 in the morning without an alarm because my body had already forgotten how to sleep peacefully. I'd make coffee just for myself. I'd drink my cup in the same chair as always, staring at the same wall as always. Then came breakfast. After that, television. Shows I didn't care about. Voices of people I didn't know, filling the silence I was too afraid to face. In the afternoons, I'd sometimes go to the supermarket. I'd buy the same things. I'd greet the same people. I'd return home. And just like that, one day after another life slipped through my fingers like sand. My children called on Sundays. They always asked the same thing. "How are you, Mom?" And I always answered the same way. "Fine, honey, just plugging along." But the truth is, I wasn't plugging along anywhere. I was stuck, frozen in time, as if my life had ended the day he left and I just hadn't realized it yet. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman looking back at me. Her eyes were tired. Her mouth had forgotten how to truly smile. That woman was me, but at the same time, she wasn't. She was what was left of me after so much time of just existing. I didn't have any close friends. Well, I had acquaintances, people I exchanged greetings with on the street or at church, but no one who really knew me. No one I could call at 3 in the morning and tell them I felt lost. I had stopped cultivating friendships years ago, first because taking care of my sick husband consumed all my time, afterward because I simply had no energy, and then because I got used to the loneliness. I became an expert in it, so much so that it started to feel more comfortable than company. My daughter-in-law Marlene was one of the few people who still tried to get close. She'd visit me every 2 weeks, always with an excuse. "I was passing by and thought I'd bring you these cookies." Or, "I was nearby and wanted to see how you were." I knew she wasn't just passing by. I knew she came because she was worried about me. And although I never told her, I thanked her silently. Marlene had that rare ability to be present without invading, to care without judging. She was a good kid. Better than my son deserved, if I'm being honest. It was Marlene who told me about the car. One April afternoon, she came to my house with that look you get when you have something important to say, but don't know how to start. We sat in the living room. "Brace yourself." And after a few minutes of small talk, she dropped the news. Her mother Eloise had passed away 3 weeks ago. Cancer, fast and merciless as those things usually are. I had barely known her. We saw each other a couple of times at family gatherings. We exchanged polite words, but nothing more. She was a quiet, elegant woman, always with a deep sadness in her eyes that I didn't know the source of. Marlene told me they were selling her mother's things, the house, the furniture, the car, and that she had thought of me when she saw the car because she knew I needed one. Mine had died 6 months ago, and since then, I depended on taxis or asking my kids for rides, which I hated. I didn't like being a burden. I didn't like needing anyone. Marlene offered me the car at a ridiculously low price. $3,000 for a vehicle that was worth at least $10,000. "It was Mom's car," she said. "I want it to go to someone who will take care of it, someone in the family." I accepted without thinking much. I needed a car, and the price was impossible to refuse. But more than that, I think I accepted because it was easier to say yes than to explain why not. We signed the papers that same week. Marlene handed me the keys with a sad smile. "Mom took great care of it," she said. "I hope it serves you well." I nodded. I thanked her and went home with a car that still smelled like the perfume of a dead woman. The first few days I only used it for the basics. Going to the supermarket, the pharmacy, to church on Sundays. It was a good car. A gray sedan, comfortable, quiet. It had built-in GPS, something my old car never had. At first I didn't pay attention to it. I wasn't going anywhere new that required navigation. But one afternoon, while waiting in the bank's parking lot, I started playing with the buttons. Bored curiosity. Nothing more. I turned on the GPS and started looking through the functions. And that's when I saw it. There was a saved address. Just one. It was named Residence. I thought it was Eloise's house, that she had simply saved her own address for some reason. Older people do those things sometimes. We save redundant information just in case. But something seems strange. Why name it Residence and not home or house? The word sounded formal, distant, as if it wasn't a place where you actually lived, but a place you went to. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that address. Why was it there? What did it mean? I told myself it was silly, that it didn't matter, that Eloise had probably saved it years ago and forgot to delete it. But my mind couldn't let it go, because deep down I think I needed a mystery, something to break the monotony, something to make me feel curious again. And that address, so simple and so strange at the same time, was exactly that. The next day I found myself looking up the address on the internet. I copied the coordinates from the GPS and pasted them into the map. The location appeared in the middle of nowhere, a mountain road 2 hours from the city, no marked buildings nearby, no clear references, just a point on the map surrounded by green, a scenic overlook maybe, or an abandoned place. It made no sense. Why would Eloise have an address like that saved? What was up there that deserved such a specific name? 3 days passed. 3 days in which I couldn't think about anything else. I'd find myself staring at the car keys, imagining myself driving up that mountain, wondering what I would find at the end of the road. I felt ridiculous. A 63-year-old woman obsessed with an address in a GPS. But at the same time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something close to excitement, to anticipation. As if there was a secret waiting for me, and only I had the key to discover it. On the morning of the 4th day, I made a decision. I was going to go. I had nothing to lose. No one was waiting for me at home. I had no plans. I had no reason to stay. And maybe, just maybe, that place had answers. Or maybe it had nothing. But either way, I needed to know. I needed to follow this curiosity to the end. Because if I didn't, I knew I would regret it. And I already had enough regrets in my life to add one more to the list I carried in silence. I left early that morning, before I could change my mind, before reason could convince me it was crazy. I dressed in comfortable clothes. I filled a water bottle. I grabbed the keys and left the house without looking back. The GPS was already on. The address Residence blinked on the screen like an invitation, or like a warning. I wasn't sure which. The first few streets were familiar. I passed by places I knew, the bakery where I bought bread on Saturdays, the park where I used to walk with my husband, the school where my children studied decades ago. But as I got farther from the center of the city, everything started to become unfamiliar. The houses became more spread out. The buildings disappeared, the trees multiplied, and suddenly I was on a highway I had never seen before. The GPS guided me with that calm, robotic voice. Continue for 2 miles. Turn right. Stay on this road. I obeyed without thinking. My hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road, my mind in a place between fear and curiosity. I didn't know what I expected to find. Part of me thought I would arrive at an empty house or an abandoned place with no story. But another part, the part that had kept me awake for 3 nights, knew there was something more. The road started to climb, sharp curves, trees so tall they blocked the sun. The air became cooler, cleaner. I could smell the pine and damp earth. It had been years since I'd left the city like this. Years since I'd ventured beyond my small circle of safety. And now here I was driving up a mountain for an address a dead woman had left saved in her GPS. If someone had told me a week ago I would be doing this, I would have laughed, or I would have thought I was losing my mind. An hour passed, then another. The road became narrower, more solitary. There were no other cars, no houses, just the road winding through the trees and the sound of the engine filling the silence. I started to doubt, to wonder if I should turn back, but something inside me said to keep going. That I had already come this far, that turning back would be worse than continuing. "You have arrived at your destination." The GPS voice startled me. I looked up and saw the road ended in a small dirt clearing. There was space to park 3 or 4 cars, but the place was completely empty. To one side, a stone path led toward what looked like an overlook. I could see a wooden railing in the distance, and beyond it, the open sky. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat in the car for a moment, breathing, trying to calm the nerves that suddenly washed over me. What was I doing here? What did I expect to find? But there was no turning back now. I had driven 2 hours to get to this place. I couldn't leave without at least seeing what was there. I opened the door and got out. The cold mountain air hit my face. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me and walked toward the path. My footsteps crunched on the loose stones. The wind moved the branches of the trees, creating a constant whisper. As I got closer to the lookout, the landscape opened up in front of me. Mountains stretching as far as the eye could see, deep valleys covered in green. A sky so vast it made me feel small and insignificant. But it wasn't the landscape that took my breath away. It was the man standing by the railing, an old man. He must have been almost 80. He had his back to me, looking at the horizon. He wore a worn brown sweater and dark pants. His hair was completely white, and there was something in the way he stood so still, so patient, that made me think he had been waiting for a long time. I took another step, then another. My feet seemed to move on their own. And when I was a few feet away, he turned, as if he had sensed my presence. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew this was not a coincidence. I knew this man knew exactly who I was, or at least he knew why I was there. "You came," he said. His voice was soft, hoarse with age, but full of contained emotion. I froze. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. He took a step toward me. His eyes were wet. "I thought no one would. I thought the message would be lost." "But you came." "I don't understand," I finally managed to say. My voice sounded small, shaky. "Who are you? Why are you here? What message?" The old man smiled, a sad smile that carried decades of pain. "The car you're driving," he said. "It belonged to Eloise." I nodded slowly. "Yes, it was my daughter-in-law's mother's. She passed away a month ago." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if those words caused him physical pain. "I know," he murmured. "I knew the moment she stopped coming." My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. "You knew her," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He nodded. "I knew her my whole life, since we were children. And I loved her every day of those years, even when she wasn't here, even when I thought I would never see her again." There was something in the way he said it that broke my heart. I could feel the weight of those words, the pain of a whole life spent waiting. "Why did she leave the address in the GPS?" I asked. The old man turned back toward the horizon. "Because Eloise knew someone would find it. Someone curious, someone who couldn't leave a mystery unsolved. She told me once that if anything happened to her, she would leave a clue, so that I would know she never forgot me, so that someone would come and tell me she thought of me until the end." I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know him. I didn't know his story. But I could feel the enormity of what I was hearing. This man had been waiting here, waiting for a sign, waiting for someone to follow the trail Eloise had left. And I had been that person. I had followed my curiosity to this place. And now I was standing in front of a love that had survived decades of separation. "What's your name?" I asked softly. He looked at me with those tired but vibrant eyes. "Moses," he said. "My name is Moses, and you must be someone special to have followed that path. Not many people would have." I shook my head. "I'm not special. I'm just a bored old woman who had nothing better to do." He smiled again. "That's what we all say when we do something brave. But the truth is, coming here took courage. More than you think." We stood in silence for a moment, both of us looking at the horizon. Two strangers united by the last wish of a woman who was gone. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process all of this, but I felt something changing inside me. Something that had been dormant for years was starting to wake up. And it had all started with a simple address and a GPS, with a mystery I couldn't ignore, with a curiosity that brought me here. "Tell me, I want to know who Eloise was to you. I want to understand why this place was so important." Moses took a deep breath, and with a voice that trembled between memory and pain, he began to speak. And I, a woman who had stopped listening to stories years ago, stood there listening to every word, feeling every emotion, living every moment of a love that never died. "I met Eloise when we were 8 years old," Moses began. His voice softened as he spoke, as if each word was a treasure saved for too long. "We were neighbors. Our houses were right next to each other in a small town 2 hours from here. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. She had long dark hair, always in a braid. And those eyes, God, those eyes could see right into your soul." He paused for a moment, lost in the memory. I said nothing. I just waited. The wind moved his white hair, and he seemed to be seeing something I couldn't see, something that existed only in his memory. "We were inseparable," he continued. "We played together every day. We grew up together. And when we turned 16, I knew I loved her, not in the way a child loves, but in the way a man loves a woman, completely, without reservations, without doubts. And her," I asked softly, "did she love you?" Moses nodded with a smile that was pure pain and pure joy at the same time. "Yes, she told me in this exact spot. We were 17. I brought her here on my old motorcycle. We rode up the mountain at sunset, and when we reached this lookout, she took my hand and told me she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. That no matter what happened, it would always be us." "What happened then?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be painful. Moses clenched his jaw. "Our families happened. My family was poor, very poor. I worked in the fields with my father. We barely had enough to eat. Eloise's family was different. Her father owned land. They had money. They had a name. And when we got engaged in secret, when I asked her to marry me, everything fell apart." He stepped away from the railing and walked a few steps. I followed him silently. "Her father found out," he continued. "I don't know how, but he knew. And he came to my house one night. He told my father that if I kept seeing Eloise, he would take away the land we rented. He would leave us on the street. My father begged me to leave her. He told me I couldn't ruin the whole family for a youthful romance, that there would be other women, that in time I would forget. But you didn't forget her," I said. Moses laughed humorlessly. "How could I? I tried to stay away. I stopped looking for her. I stopped going to the places where I knew she'd be. But the pain was unbearable, and she was suffering too. I found out later that she cried every night, that she stopped eating, that her father had to take her to the doctor because she was sick with sadness. 3 months later, Eloise came looking for me. She found me working in the fields. She told me she couldn't take it anymore, that she would die if we weren't together. And God forgive me, I was weak. I loved her too much to let her go, so we started seeing each other in secret. Here, in this place, it was our refuge, our separate world. We'd come up the mountain whenever we could, sometimes just for an hour. Sometimes we'd stay until dawn, and at this lookout we were free. It was just us. How long did that last? I asked. Moses looked at the sky. 2 years. 2 stolen years. 2 years of lies and hiding and constant fear. But they were also the 2 happiest years of my life. Because I had her, even if it was in secret, even if it was only in this place. I had her, and that was enough. But it didn't last forever, I said quietly. He shook his head. No. One afternoon, Eloise's brother followed us. He found us here. He told his father. And this time, her father didn't come to threaten me. He just took Eloise away. He sent her to live with an aunt and uncle in another city. Took her away from me overnight. No goodbyes, no explanations. One day she was here, and the next she was gone. I felt my heart squeeze. You couldn't contact her. Moses wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I tried. I wrote letters. They were all returned unopened. I went to the city where she was. Her uncle chased me off with a rifle. They told me if I ever came near her again, they'd put me in jail. That they'd make something up if they had to. That I had to forget her and move on with my life. But you kept coming here, I said, looking around the empty lookout. Moses nodded. Every week, for 40 years. I came here every Sunday. At first I came because I hoped she would come back, because I thought she'd find a way to return to me. But months passed, then years, and she never came back. I found out she had gotten married, that she had children, that she had built a life without me. Did you ever marry? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He shook his head slowly. I couldn't. I tried to date other women. My family pressured me. My friends told me I was a fool, that I was wasting my life waiting for someone who would never return. And they were right. I was a fool. But I couldn't help it, because every time I tried to kiss another woman, I saw Eloise's face. Every time I tried to love someone else, my heart reminded me it already belonged to someone. So you just kept coming here, I said. Moses smiled sadly. Yes, it changed from hope to a ritual. I no longer came expecting to see her. I came because this was the only place I could still feel her close, where the memories were so strong I could almost hear her laugh. I could almost feel her hand in mine. This place became my church, my confession, my refuge. We fell silent. I didn't know what to say in the face of so much pain, of an entire life dedicated to an impossible love. Moses walked back to the railing and looked out over the valley. 6 months ago, he said, something extraordinary happened. I was here on a Sunday morning as always, and I heard a car coming up the road. I didn't think anything of it. Sometimes hikers come by, but when the car parked and the door opened, I saw her. It was her. Eloise. After 40 years, she was standing right there, looking at me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. She came, I whispered. Moses nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. She walked toward me. She was no longer the 17-year-old girl I had loved. She was an older woman, with gray hair, with wrinkles, but her eyes were still the same, and when she spoke to me, it was as if not a single day had passed. Moses, she said, forgive me for taking so long. Forgive me for not being braver. I hugged her. I hugged her like I had dreamed of doing for 40 years, and we cried. We both cried like children. All the unsaid words, all the lives we didn't live together. All the lost time. It all came out in that embrace. She told me she never stopped loving me, that she thought of me every day of her life, that her marriage had been arranged, that she had been a good wife and a good mother, but her heart never belonged to her husband. It was always mine. Why did she come back after so much time? I asked. Moses took a deep breath. Because she was sick, cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. And she decided she couldn't die without seeing me one last time, without telling me she always loved me, without saying goodbye in this place where it all began. We came here every week after that. Moses continued, his voice breaking. Every Sunday, just like we used to when we were young. She would drive from the city. I would drive up in my old truck. And we would meet here in our place. We talked for hours about everything we had lived through separately, about the children she had, about the jobs I had held, about the dreams that never came true, about the life that should have been ours. He sat on the ground near the railing. I followed, sitting beside him. The wind blew softly, and the sun began to set on the horizon. "We didn't have much time," Moses said. "We knew it. Every week that passed, she was weaker, paler. The cancer was consuming her, but she never missed. Not one Sunday, even when she could barely walk, even when the pain was terrible. She came, because these moments were all we had." I asked her if she regretted her life, marrying another man, not fighting harder for us. She looked at me with those tired eyes and told me no. That she had loved her children, that she had found purpose in being a mother, but that if she could go back, if she could choose again, she would have chosen me without hesitation. And that in some strange way gave me peace, knowing I wasn't the only one who carried this love all these years. The last time we saw each other was 2 months ago. Moses continued. She was very sick. She could barely breathe. I told her not to come anymore, to stay home, to rest. But she insisted. She told me she needed to see me one last time, that she needed to say goodbye here, in the place where it all began. So she came. Her daughter Marlene drove her in the car. She helped her get out, and she left us alone for an hour. Marlene knew, I asked, surprised. Moses nodded. Eloise told her everything. She told her our story, told her I had been the love of her life. Marlene cried when she found out. She cried for her mother, for me, for all the time we lost. But she understood, and she was generous enough to give us that last moment together. "We sat right here," Moses said, pointing to the exact spot where we were. Eloise rested her head on my shoulder. I held her, and we stayed like that in silence, watching the sunset. We didn't need words. We had talked enough during those 6 months. We had already said everything. We just wanted to be together, to feel each other's presence, to memorize that moment because we knew it would be the last. When the sun had completely set, she lifted her head. She looked me in the eyes, and she told me something I will never forget. "Moses," she said, "I am leaving, but I want you to know that these last few months were the greatest gift of my life. You gave me more love in 6 months than I received in 40 years. And even though we couldn't have the life we dreamed of, we had this. We had this place. We had these moments. And that is enough." I told her I loved her, that I would love her until my last breath, that when I died, my soul would come looking for her, and we would finally be together, and no one could ever separate us. She smiled, that sad smile she always had, and she gave me a kiss, a long, deep kiss, a kiss that tasted like goodbye and a promise at the same time. Then she told me something strange. She said she had left a clue, a sign, that someone would come eventually, someone who would find the address saved in her GPS. And that person would bring me a message. I didn't understand at the time. I didn't think it was important. I just thought it was the pain talking, that the medication was confusing her, but I played along. I told her I would wait, that I would be here every Sunday as always, waiting. Marlene came back for her, helped her walk to the car. Eloise turned around one last time. She looked at me, and she raised her hand in farewell. I raised mine too. And that's how we said goodbye. No screaming, no drama. Just 2 people who had loved each other their whole lives finally letting go. She died 3 weeks later. Moses wiped his tears. I didn't go to the funeral. I wasn't invited, and I wouldn't have gone even if I had been. I didn't want to see her in a casket. I didn't want my last memory of her to be that. I preferred to remember her here, alive, smiling, with her head on my shoulder watching the sunset. But I kept coming every Sunday, because I had promised her I would be here, and because somehow I felt she was still visiting me, that her spirit was in this place, in the wind, in the trees, in the silence. And then today, when I saw that gray car coming up the road, the car I knew so well, I knew it was the sign. I knew you were the person Eloise had mentioned. He looked me straight in the eyes. And you came. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you decided to follow that address. But you came, and that means Eloise kept her promise. She left a trail so someone would find me. So someone would tell me she thought of me until the end, so I would know I wasn't crazy for waiting here all these years, that what we felt was real, that our love mattered. I felt tears running down my cheeks. I didn't know what to say. The story of Moses and Eloise was devastating. It was beautiful and tragic at the same time. And I had been the messenger without knowing it. I had followed my curiosity to this place and found a love that survived decades of separation. A love that neither distance, nor time, nor death could destroy. She loved you, I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. She loved you until the end, and she wanted you to know. Moses nodded. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since I met him, I saw peace on his face. Thank you, he said. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me tell this story. I've carried it alone for so long that sometimes I thought I would go crazy. We sat there as night began to fall, two strangers who were strangers no longer, united by the last wish of a woman who had loved with her entire being. I thought about my own life, my own loneliness, the 5 years I had wasted just existing, and I realized that Eloise hadn't just left a message for Moses. She had left one for me too. She had shown me that true love exists, that it's worth taking risks, that it's worth feeling, that a life without love isn't really living, and that it's never too late. Eloise had been 62 when she went back to find Moses, 62 years old and with only months to live. But she did it. She had the courage to follow her heart one last time, and those 6 months were enough. They were everything. Moses, I said softly. He looked at me. Thank you for sharing your story with me. You've taught me something I had forgotten, something I had buried along with my husband. You've reminded me that I'm still alive, that I can still feel, that I can still choose to truly live instead of just existing. He smiled. Then Eloise left a message for you too, not just for me, for you. That night, I drove back home in complete silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want any noise to interrupt the thoughts swirling in my head. The story of Moses and Eloise had stirred something deep inside me, something I thought was dead. I got home after midnight. I went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in 5 years, the loneliness didn't feel comfortable. It felt wrong. It felt like a choice I had been making without realizing it. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Eloise, about how she had lived for 40 years with a love hidden in her heart, how she had been a good wife and a good mother, but never complete. And I thought about Moses, how he had waited his whole life, how he had chosen loneliness rather than love anyone who wasn't her. And I wondered which was worse, living halfway like Eloise, or not living at all like Moses. But then I thought about those last 6 months they had together, how Eloise had found the courage to go back, to find him, to tell him the truth before she died. And I realized that had been her redemption, her way of closing the circle, of not leaving this world with that love trapped inside. She had been brave, braver than I had been in years. The next morning I woke up different. I couldn't explain exactly what had changed, but something in me had shifted. I made coffee as usual, but instead of sitting in my chair staring at the wall, I went out to the patio. I hadn't done that in months. The garden was neglected, the plants half dead, but the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the fresh air filled my lungs in a way that made me feel alive. I spent the day cleaning, pulling weeds, watering the plants that could still be saved. I worked until my back ached and my hands were dirty with soil, but it felt good. I felt useful. I felt present. When I finished, I sat on the front step and looked at my work. It wasn't much, just a half-rescued garden. But it was something. It was a start. The following Sunday, I did something I hadn't planned. I took the car keys, and I drove back to the mountain. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I felt the story wasn't over. Or maybe because I wanted to see Moses again, to make sure he was okay. When I got to the lookout, he was there, in the same spot, as if he had never moved. "You came back," he said when he saw me. He didn't seem surprised, just pleased. I walked over to him and stood by his side. "Yes," I said, "I came back." I wasn't sure why, but I felt I should. Moses nodded, looking at the horizon. Sometimes places call to us. Or people. Or stories that haven't finished being told. We stood in silence for a while. It was a comfortable silence, the kind of silence you can share with someone without feeling the need to fill it with unnecessary words. Finally, I asked him if he came every Sunday. He said yes, that he had come every Sunday for 40 years and he wasn't going to stop now. "This is my place," he said, "my sanctuary, the only piece of earth where I feel at peace." "Can I come with you?" I asked. The words came out before I could think about them. I don't know where they came from, but the moment I said them, I knew they were right. Moses looked at me surprised. "You'd like to do that?" he asked. I nodded. "I think so. I think this place is good for me, too. It reminds me there's more to life than just passing the days. It reminds me I can still feel something." Moses smiled. "Then come. Come every Sunday if you want. I could use the company. I've been alone here for a long time. It would be nice to share this place with someone." And so it began. Every Sunday I would drive the 2 hours to the lookout. Moses would already be there waiting. At first we just sat in silence, looking at the scenery, breathing the mountain air. But slowly we started to talk. He told me more about his life, about the jobs he'd had, the things he'd seen, the places he'd traveled trying to forget Eloise but never succeeding. He told me about his family, about his parents who died without understanding why their son never married, about his siblings who stopped insisting after years of rejection. He told me he lived alone in a small house near the town, that his life was simple, quiet, lonely, but not unhappy. I started to open up too. I told him about my husband, about how I had loved him but not in the passionate way he had loved Eloise. My marriage had been good, stable, comfortable, but it never had that spark, that all-consuming, transforming fire. I told him I sometimes felt guilty about that, for not having loved enough, for having let my husband die without knowing my heart had always been a little asleep. Moses listened without judging. "Not all loves are like mine and Eloise's," he said, "and that doesn't make them less valid. Love comes in many forms. And the fact that you were there for your husband, that you took care of him, that you gave him a peaceful life, that is also love. We don't all need the storm. Sometimes the calm is enough." His words gave me a peace I didn't know I needed. I had carried that guilt for years, that feeling of not having been enough, of not having felt enough. But Moses was right. I had loved in my own way, and that was okay. I didn't have to be like Eloise for my love to count. I had been me, and that was enough. The weeks passed. Sundays became the part of the week I looked forward to most. They weren't just another day anymore. They were the day I felt alive again, the day I had something to look forward to. Something that got me out of the house and reminded me there was a world out there, a beautiful world, a world worth experiencing. I started to notice changes in myself. Small at first. I started dressing up more, not just on Sundays, but every day. I'd put on clothes I liked instead of the first thing I found. I'd fix my hair. I'd put on a little makeup, not out of vanity, but because I was starting to care again how I looked. I was starting to care about myself again. I also started going out more. I'd go to the farmer's market on Saturdays instead of doing one big, boring grocery trip. I'd walk in the park. I'd sit on the benches and watch people go by. I accepted an invitation from a neighbor for coffee, something I had refused dozens of times before, and I discovered it wasn't so terrible. That talking to someone, laughing, sharing stories, it was nice. It was necessary. My children noticed the change. My son called me one Tuesday night. "Mom," he said, "you sound different, happier." I told him I was fine, that I had started going out more, that I had met a friend. I didn't tell him who Moses was. I didn't tell him the story. Not yet. That was something private, something for me, something I wasn't ready to share. But I told him I felt better, that I was finally starting to live again. And it was true. After 5 years of just existing, I was finally living. And it had all started with an address in a GPS, with a mystery I couldn't ignore, with a love story that taught me it's never too late to feel, that it's never too late to choose life over survival, that it's never too late to open your heart again. 3 months had passed since that first Sunday at the Lookout. 3 months of increasingly deep conversations. 3 months of shared silences that said more than 1,000 words. 3 months in which Moses and I became something more than two strangers united by someone else's story. We became friends, confidants, companions in the midst of two lonelinesses that had lasted far too long. One Sunday, I arrived at the Lookout, and Moses wasn't in his usual spot by the railing. I found him sitting on a rock by the side of the path. He looked tired, older than usual. I approached worried. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, Elda. Just a little tired. The years weigh more heavily on some days than others." I sat down next to him. For the first time, I noticed how much he had aged. The deep wrinkles around his eyes, the trembling hands, the way he breathed as if it were an effort. This man had waited his whole life. He had come to this place for 40 years. And now that he had finally had his goodbye with Eloise, it seemed his body had decided it could rest. "You know," Moses said after a long silence, "when Eloise died, I thought I would go soon too. I thought that without her, without the hope of seeing her again, I would have no reason to go on. But then you came, and I realized that maybe there was another reason. Maybe Eloise sent me someone not just to give me her message, but to teach me that life goes on. That there is still beauty in being alive, even at our age, even after everything." His words touched me deeply. I had thought the same thing. That after my husband there was nothing left for me, that my life was already written and all that was left was to wait for the end. But these 3 months had shown me the opposite. They had taught me that there is always room for new stories, for new connections, for new beginnings, no matter how old we are. Moses looked at me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Elda," he said, "can I confess something to you?" I nodded. "Of course. Anything." He took a deep breath. "I have enjoyed these Sundays more than I can express. When you arrive, this place feels different. It's no longer just the sanctuary of a lost love. It's also a place of hope, of the present, of life. And I've realized that I look forward to Sundays, not just out of habit, but because I know you will be here." I felt something move in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. It was different from what I felt for my husband. It wasn't the comfort of familiar love. It was something more intense, more present, more real. "I look forward to Sundays too," I said in a low voice. "In fact, they're the only thing I look forward to all week. The rest of the days are just time passing until I can come back here, until I can see you again." We looked at each other for a long moment, and in that silence, I understood something that scared and excited me at the same time. I was falling in love, at 63 years old, with a man who was almost 80, a man who had loved another woman his entire life, a man who could probably never love me the way he loved Eloise, but still even knowing all that my heart had decided to feel again. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't confess what was happening inside me. I was afraid of ruining what we had, afraid he wouldn't feel the same, afraid of being ridiculous, an old woman in love like a teenager. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. It got stronger every Sunday. Every conversation, every time our hands brushed by accident, and I felt electricity run through my skin. A month later, Moses arrived at the Lookout with something in his hands, a small carved wooden box. He sat next to me and handed it to me. "This was Eloise's," he said. She gave it to me the last time we saw each other. She told me to keep it until I felt the time was right, and I think that time is now." I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a carefully folded letter. The paper was old, the ink a bit faded, but the handwriting was clear. Elegant. The handwriting of a woman who knew she was writing her last words. Moses nodded. "Read it. It's for you too." I unfolded the letter, and I began to read. "My dearest Moses, if you are reading this, it's because I am gone, and it's also because someone followed the clue I left. Someone curious, someone brave, someone who needed to find you as much as you needed to be found. I don't know who this person will be, but I know they will come, because the universe is generous with lonely hearts when they are finally ready to open. I want you to know that these last few months with you were the greatest gift of my life. You gave me peace. You gave me closure. You gave me the chance to love you openly one last time. And although I am leaving, I leave happy, because I know I loved you well, and because I know you loved me better. But now I need you to promise me something. I need you to live, truly live, not just exist waiting for me at that lookout. I need you to open your heart to the possibility of being happy. You don't have to love me less to love someone else. The heart doesn't work that way. Love isn't used up. It multiplies, and you have so much love to give that it would be a crime for it to die unshared. To the person reading this with Moses, thank you. Thank you for following your curiosity. Thank you for listening to his story. Thank you for giving him company. I know you didn't know me. I know this must seem strange. But I trust that the universe put you in his path for a reason. Maybe he needed your friendship, or maybe you needed his story, or maybe just maybe you need each other in ways you don't yet understand. Don't be afraid to feel. Don't be afraid to live. I wasted 40 years being a coward, 40 years where I could have fought harder, where I could have been braver. Don't make my mistake. If there's something you want to say, say it. If there's something you want to do it. Because time is cruel and unforgiving, and regrets weigh more than any mistake. With love, Eloise." Tears were streaming down my face when I finished reading. I looked at Moses and saw he was crying too. We stayed like that for a long time. 2 broken people. 2 lonely people. 2 people who had found comfort in each other's pain. And now we had the blessing of a dead woman to dare to feel something more. "Elda," Moses said in a hoarse voice, "there's something I need to tell you." I shook my head. "No, let me speak first, because if I don't say it now, I never will. And Eloise is right. I don't want any more regrets." I took his hand, the old wrinkled hand of a man who had waited a lifetime. "I've fallen in love with you, not in the way I loved Eloise. That was fire, passion, a storm. This is different. It's softer, calmer, but no less real, no less important." Moses squeezed my hand. "Me too," he said. "I thought I could never love anyone else after her. I thought my heart had been buried with Eloise, but you proved me wrong. You taught me that the heart can love more than once, in different ways, and that it's okay. That it's not a betrayal. That it's just life following its natural course." We moved closer to each other, and there in the same place where Eloise and Moses had loved 40 years earlier, we kissed. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't overflowing passion. It was tenderness. It was understanding. It was 2 tired souls finding refuge in one another. It was perfect. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling, shy smiles, like teenagers experiencing their first love, because in a way, that's exactly what we were. 2 older people living something new, something they had never experienced like this, something that was worth every year of waiting, every year of loneliness, every year of pain. "What do we do now?" I asked. Moses looked at the horizon. The horizon he had stared at for 40 years, waiting for something that had finally arrived. "We live," he said simply. "We live whatever time we have left, without fear, without guilt. We just live." and that's exactly what we did. The following months were like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Moses and I continued to see each other every Sunday at the lookout. But now we also saw each other during the week. He would come down to the town, and we would spend the afternoons together. We'd have coffee on my patio. We'd walk in the park. We'd go to the movies like two kids on their first date. And every moment felt precious. Every moment felt stolen from the time we had wasted being alone. The first time Moses came to my house, he stood in the doorway, looking at everything with curiosity. "It's a cozy place," he said. "It feels like you. Warm. Calm. Full of hidden life waiting to come out." I made coffee and we sat in the living room. We talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About our past lives, about our fears, about our hopes for the time we had left. I told him more about my husband, about how he had been a good but distant man, about how our marriage had been more of a partnership than a romance. We took care of each other, I told him. We raised our children. We built a stable life. But there was never that spark. That deep connection. And for years I thought that was normal. That's just how marriage was. But now I realize I was settling. Moses listened without judgment. "I don't think you were settling," he said. "I think you were doing the best you could with what you had. Not everyone receives the same kind of love, and not all of us know something different exists until we experience it. You were a good wife, a good mother. That counts. That matters, and now you're getting a second chance. Not many people get that lucky." He was right. Not many people our age get a second chance at love. Most resign themselves. They settle into loneliness or dead marriages. But we had found something different, something unexpected, and we weren't going to waste a second of it. I started introducing him to my neighbors. At first, with some embarrassment. I didn't know how to explain who he was. My boyfriend sounded ridiculous at 63. My friend sounded too casual for what we felt. In the end, I would just say, "This is Moses," and I let them draw their own conclusions. Most smiled knowingly. Some were surprised, but no one judged. Or if they did, I didn't care. One afternoon, Marlene came to visit unannounced. She knocked on the door just as Moses and I were on the patio. I opened it, and her face showed surprise at seeing an unknown man in my house. "Marlene," I said, "there's someone I want you to meet." We went out to the patio. Moses stood up, and when Marlene saw him, her face changed. First confusion, then recognition, then tears. "You're Moses," she said, her voice breaking. "My mother's Moses," he nodded. "I am, and you must be Marlene. Your mother spoke a lot about you. She told me you were a good daughter, that you took care of her until the end." Marlene put her hands to her mouth. "I can't believe you're together. My mother." She wanted this. She planned all of this. The three of us sat down, and I told them the whole story. How I had found the address in the GPS, how I had gone up the mountain, how I met Moses and heard his story, how we had started seeing each other every Sunday, and how we had eventually fallen in love. Marlene cried as she listened. When I finished, she got up and hugged Moses. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for making my mother happy in her final months. Thank you for loving her as she deserved. And thank you for letting Elda be a part of this. My mother would have been so happy to know you found each other." That her story had this ending. Moses was crying too. "Your mother was the love of my life," he said, "but Elda is my second chance, and I'm going to honor them both by loving her well." After that afternoon, Marlene became our biggest ally. She invited us to eat with her and my son. At first, my son was confused, uncomfortable even. "Mom," he told me in private, "are you sure about this? Are you happy?" I looked him in the eye. "Happier than I've been in years, honey. Moses makes me feel alive again. He reminds me there's still time to experience new things, to feel things I thought I'd never feel again." My son took a deep breath. "Then I'm happy for you, Mom. You deserve to be happy, and if he makes you happy, then he has my blessing." Those words meant more than he could possibly imagine. I didn't need his permission, but I did need to know he understood, that he was supportive, that he wasn't judging me for choosing to live again instead of staying trapped in the past. Sundays at the lookout became sacred. We no longer went just to remember. We went to create new memories. We'd bring food. We'd stay for hours talking, planning small trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to visit, things we wanted to experience together. We weren't 20. We didn't have the energy of youth, but we had something better. We had the wisdom of knowing that time was precious, that every moment counted. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our favorite spot, Moses took my hand. "Elda," he said, "I've been thinking about something. I want you to move in with me, or I'll move in with you. I don't want to keep wasting days. I want to wake up next to you. I want to have coffee with you every morning. I want to share my life with you for whatever time we have left." My heart sped up. It was a terrifying proposal, living together, at our age, with our ingrained habits, with our quirks. But it was also exciting. It was the promise of no longer being alone, of having constant companionship, of building something together in the time we had left. "Yes," I said without thinking too much. "Yes, I do. I want to wake up next to you. I want to share my life with you." We decided he would move into my house. It was bigger, more comfortable. And it was in the town where I had all my things, my doctors, my familiar places. Moses had no problem with that. He had lived alone for decades. Any place would be better if I was there. We started making plans, imagining what our life together would be like, and every plan filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. My children reacted differently. My older son was happy for me. My younger daughter was skeptical. "Mom," she said on the phone, "you barely know him. What if he turns out to be different when you live together? What if it doesn't work out?" I told her it was a risk I was willing to take, that I had spent 5 years risking nothing, 5 years in a comfort zone that was more like a prison, and that I'd rather try and fail than be left wondering what might have been. The move was simple. Moses didn't have many things: a few boxes of clothes, some books, old photographs, and one special box that held all the letters Eloise had written him when they were young, the ones his family returned unopened but that he had kept for years. He asked me if it bothered me that he brought them, if it made me uncomfortable that he kept those memories. "It doesn't bother me," I said honestly. "Eloise was an important part of your life. I'm not going to ask you to erase that. I'm not competing with her memory. I'm grateful to her, because her love for you and your love for her brought me here. They taught me that true love exists, and they gave me the chance to experience it myself." Moses hugged me tight. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said, "but thank you. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not being afraid of a past I can't change." And the first night Moses slept at my house was strange and wonderful at the same time. We had dinner together, we watched TV, and when it was time for bed, there was a moment of awkwardness. We hadn't talked about sleeping together, about sharing a bed. We were older. Our bodies weren't what they used to be. Our expectations were different. But when we turned off the lights and got into bed, he simply took my hand, and we fell asleep, just like that, holding hands like two children afraid of the dark. And it was perfect, because we didn't need more than that. We just needed to know we weren't alone, that someone was there, someone who understood us, someone who accepted us with our wounds and our scars. I woke up in the middle of the night and watched him sleep, his steady breathing, his relaxed face, and I felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Gratitude for having followed that address in the GPS, gratitude for having been curious enough, brave enough, gratitude for Eloise and her final gift, and gratitude for this man sleeping beside me, this man who had taught me that it's never too late to live again. Living with Moses turned out to be easier than I imagined. We got used to each other with surprising ease. He would get up early and make the coffee. I would make breakfast. We'd spend the mornings reading the newspaper together on the patio. The afternoons we dedicated to walking around the neighborhood or just being at home enjoying each other's company. And the evenings we spent talking until sleep overcame us. Not everything was perfect. We had our differences. He was tidier than me. I was more impulsive than him. Sometimes we argued about silly things, how to fold the towels or what temperature to set the air conditioning. But even those arguments had something beautiful about them, because they meant we were building a life together, that we were learning to compromise, to negotiate, to find a middle ground. One morning, 2 months after he moved in, Moses woke up coughing. At first I didn't think much of it. It was just a cough. Probably a cold. But the days passed and the cough didn't get better. It got worse. He got tired easily. He lost his appetite. And one night as we were sleeping, I heard him struggling to breathe. That scared me. The next morning, I forced him to go to the doctor. The tests took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of uncertainty, of silent fear, of sleepless nights imagining the worst. Moses tried to stay calm, to act like nothing was wrong. But I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw how he looked at things more intently, as if he were memorizing them, preparing to say goodbye. When the results finally came, the doctor gave us the news with a gentleness that only made it hurt more. Lung cancer. Advanced. It had probably been developing for years without symptoms. Treatment could give him a few more months, maybe a year, but it was aggressive. And at his age, his body might not withstand the chemotherapy. He had to decide, quality of life or quantity of time. We left the office in silence, got in the car, and just sat there saying nothing. Finally, Moses spoke. "I'm not going to do the treatment," he said. "I'm not going to spend my last months feeling worse than I already do. I want to live, really live, for whatever time I have left. I want to enjoy every day with you without being sick and weak from the medicine." I wanted to argue. I wanted to convince him to fight, to try anything that could give him more time. But when I looked him in the eyes, I understood. He had waited his whole life. He had suffered 40 years of loneliness. And now that he had finally found peace, he wasn't going to waste his last months in hospitals and painful treatments. He was going to live, and I was going to be by his side. "Okay," I said, taking his hand. "We'll do it your way. We will live every day as if it's a gift, because it is. And when the time comes, I'll be with you. You won't be alone, I promise you." Moses squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Elda. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not making me fight a battle I don't want to fight. Thank you for just being here." The next few months were the most intense of my life. Knowing that time was limited, every moment became precious. We did all the things we had planned. We went to the beach, something neither of us had done in years. We sat on the sand watching the ocean for hours, feeling the sun on our skin, listening to the waves, living fully. We visited nearby towns neither of us knew. We ate at new restaurants. We tried foods we had never tried. We bought ice cream and ate it walking through the park like kids. We went to the theater, to museums, to concerts. We did everything Moses's body allowed. And when he was too tired to go out, we stayed home, watching movies, reading, just being together. Every Sunday we continued to go up to the lookout. Even when Moses could barely walk, even when he had to stop every few steps to catch his breath, he insisted on going. "This place is sacred," he'd tell me. "This is where I loved Eloise. This is where I met you. This is where my life made sense. I want to come until I can't anymore." And so we did. Until the very last Sunday, he was able to go up. That day, sitting in our favorite spot, Moses told me something I'll never forget. "Elda," he said, "I want you to know that these last few months have been the happiest of my life. Yes, I loved Eloise with all my soul. And yes, I waited for her for decades. But what I have with you is different. It's real. It's present. It's complete. And I wouldn't trade a single day of this time together for anything in the world." I cried when I heard him say that, because I felt the same way. These months with Moses had been more meaningful than entire years of my previous life. He had taught me how to truly live, to feel deeply, to not be afraid of love just because it comes with the possibility of loss. Love always comes with that possibility, but it's worth it. It's always worth it. It reached a point where Moses could no longer get out of bed. His body was finally giving up. I hired a nurse to come during the day, but the nights were mine. I would lie down next to him. I'd hold his hand. I'd talk to him about our memories, about the things we had experienced together. I'd read him his favorite books. I'd play soft music. And he would smile. Even in pain, he would smile. One night, Marlene came to visit us. She brought my son with her. They sat around Moses's bed, and he told them stories about his youth, about Eloise, about how he had met his dead mother-in-law, about how she had been the love of his life, but I had been his redemption. My son cried. He didn't know men who were almost 80 could love like that, with so much intensity, with such purity. Before they left, my son hugged me. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry I ever doubted this. I'm sorry I didn't understand from the beginning. What you two have is special. It's rare, and I feel lucky to have witnessed it. You taught me that it's never too late for love, that you should never give up." Those words gave me peace, because they meant that what Moses and I shared hadn't just changed us. It had touched others too. The last week was the hardest. Moses slept most of the time. When he was awake, he could barely speak, but his eyes said everything. When he looked at me, I saw gratitude, love, peace, and I tried to give him that same look back, to tell him without words that it had been worth it, that I would do it all over again, that I regretted nothing. On the last night, I lay down next to him as always. I whispered in his ear, "I love you, Moses. Thank you for teaching me how to live again. Thank you for showing me that love can arrive at any moment. At any age, thank you for choosing me." He weakly squeezed my hand, and with an effort that must have cost him everything, he murmured, "Elda, my Elda. See you soon." He fell asleep with his hand in mine, and sometime in the early hours of the morning, his breathing stopped. It was quiet, peaceful, painless. I lay there next to him until the sun came up, crying, thanking him, saying goodbye, and when I finally got up, I knew I was changed forever, that I would never go back to being the empty woman I was before, because Moses had taught me something priceless. He had taught me that living is worth it, always. The funeral was small, intimate, just the people who truly knew him. Marlene spoke, my son spoke, and I spoke too. I told everyone how a GPS with a mysterious address had led me to the love of my life, how a dead woman had conspired from the beyond to unite two lonely souls, how Moses had saved me without even knowing it. And how our time together, though brief had been enough, it had been everything. After the funeral, Marlene gave me something, a letter. It was from Moses. He had written it weeks before he died and asked her to give it to me afterward. With trembling hands, I opened it, and I read his last words to me, words of love, of gratitude, of hope, and in the last line a request, "Keep living, Elda, not for me, for you, because you deserve every day of happiness you can find, and because now you know how. I love you. Always." The first few days after Moses' death were the darkest. I'd wake up expecting to see him next to me and find the bed empty. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit, and then remember I was alone again. The house felt too big, too quiet, and for a moment I was afraid of falling back into that void I had lived in for 5 years, that place where I only existed without really living. But something was different this time. The pain I felt wasn't the same dull gray pain I had felt when my husband died. This pain was sharp, intense, alive, and even though it hurt, it also reminded me that I had loved, that I had felt, that I had lived something real and profound, and that in some strange way gave me comfort, because it meant Moses had left a mark on me, a mark that would never be erased. Marlene came to see me every couple of days. She brought me food, she sat with me, she let me cry without trying to comfort me with empty words. She was just there, and her presence was enough. One day, she brought me a box. "This was in my mother's things," she said. "I think you'll want to see it." I opened the box, and inside, I found a photo album. Photos of Eloise and Moses when they were young, at the lookout, smiling, hugging, in love. I cried looking at those photos, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, because those images showed me something beautiful. They showed me their love had been real, that it had been worth it, and that even though they couldn't be together, even though life separated them for decades, they found each other again in the end. And that ending, though brief, had been enough. It had been everything they needed. On the last page of the album, there was a different photo. It was recent. Eloise and Moses at the lookout, both old, both tired, but with the same smiles they had in the photos from their youth. Marlene told me she had taken that photo the last day her mother saw Moses, the day they said goodbye, and seeing them like that together one last time broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Weeks passed, then months. The pain didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. I learned to live with it, to carry it as part of me. And slowly, I started going out again, walking in the park, having coffee with neighbors, accepting invitations I would have refused before. Because I remembered Moses's letter, his request for me to keep living, and I wasn't going to let him down. One Sunday, 6 months after his death, I took the car keys, the same car I had bought from Eloise, the same car that had the mysterious address that changed my life. And I drove to the lookout. I hadn't been back since Moses died. I was afraid it would be too painful. But something was calling me to that place. Something was telling me it was time to go back. When I arrived, the place was exactly as I remembered. The wooden railing, the tall trees, the infinite horizon. I walked over to the spot where Moses used to stand, where he had waited for 40 years, where he had told me his story, where we had fallen in love, and I just stood there feeling the wind on my face, listening to the silence of the mountain. "Hello, Moses," I said out loud. "Hello, Eloise. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for teaching me that love exists, that it's worth the risk, that it's never too late." Tears were running down my face, but I was smiling, because I knew that wherever they were finally together, finally free, finally at peace. I sat on the ground, in the same spot where Moses and I had sat so many times, and I took a notebook out of my bag. I had started writing, documenting our story, the story of how an address in a GPS led me to love, how two lonely people found each other in the most unexpected place, how we learned that it's never too late to live again. I wrote for myself, to process, to remember, but I also wrote with the hope that someone else might read it someday, someone who was lost like I had been, someone who needed to know that there is always hope. I spent hours up there that day, writing, remembering, crying and laughing at the same time. And when the sun began to set, I closed the notebook. I stood up, and I spoke to the horizon one last time. "I'm going to live, Moses, like you asked. I'm going to live every day I have left. For me, for you, for Eloise, for everyone who didn't get the chance we had." I drove down the mountain with my heart lighter than it had been in months. And when I got home, instead of locking myself in, I went out. I walked around the neighborhood. I greeted people. I accepted a neighbor's invitation for dinner. And that night, for the first time since Moses died, I went to sleep without that crushing weight on my chest. I went to sleep with hope. The following months were transformative. I joined a book club. I started painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never dared. I traveled alone for the first time in my life. I went to the town where Eloise was born. I visited the places she and Moses had loved, and in every place I felt their presence. I felt they were guiding me, encouraging me to keep going. I met new people. I made friends. Women my age who were also learning to live again after losses. We'd get together on Thursdays for tea and to share stories, and I would tell them mine, the story of the GPS, of the lookout, of Moses and Eloise, and they all cried. They all told me it was the most beautiful story they had ever heard, that it gave them hope, that it reminded them it's never too late. A year after Moses's death, I went back to the lookout. This time, I didn't go alone. I brought Marlene. I brought my children. I brought my friends from the book club, and there, facing that infinite horizon, I read the entire story aloud. Everything I had written, everything I had lived, and when I finished, everyone was crying. but they were good tears, tears of hope, of inspiration, of gratitude. Marlene hugged me tight. "Thank you, Elda," she said. "Thank you for loving Moses. Thank you for honoring my mother's memory. Thank you for showing that love has no age, that it's never too late to start over." My son hugged me too. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said. "You've taught me more in these last 2 years than in my whole life. You taught me to be brave, to not be afraid to feel, to really live." Those words filled me with a deep joy, because they meant my story hadn't just changed me. It had touched others. It had inspired. It had taught. And that was exactly what Eloise had wanted. That's why she left that address in the GPS. Not just so Moses would know she loved him until the end, but to create a chain of love, of hope, of transformation. Today I am 65 years old. It's been 2 years since I bought that car. 2 years since I followed my curiosity up a mountain. 2 years since I met Moses. And even though he is gone, his impact on my life is still immense. He changed me. He saved me. He taught me how to live. I am no longer the empty woman who just existed. Now I am someone who lives fully, who feels deeply, who is not afraid to take risks, who knows that love can come at any moment, at any age, in any form, and that it is always, always worth it. I still go up to the lookout every Sunday. It's my ritual, my way of honoring Moses and Eloise, my way of reminding myself that I must keep living. And every time I'm up there looking at that infinite horizon, I feel them with me, guiding me, protecting me, reminding me that life is a gift, that every day counts, that it's never too late. And if I could give one piece of advice to anyone reading this, to someone who feels lost, empty, resigned, I would tell you this: follow your curiosity, dare to explore, dare to feel, because you never know where a simple address saved in a GPS might lead you. You never know what story is waiting for you at the end of the road. You never know when life is going to give you a second chance. And when that chance comes, take it. Don't be afraid. Don't hesitate. Don't settle for just existing. Live. Live completely. Live with no regrets. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is the love you gave and the love you received, the experiences you lived, the people you touched, and the moments you dared to feel fully. This was my story, the story of how a mysterious address led me to love, led me to myself, led me to the life I should have been living all along. And I hope my story inspires you to find yours, to follow your own path, to dare to live fully. Because we all deserve that chance. We all deserve love. We all deserve to feel alive, no matter our age, no matter our past, no matter what. It's never too late. Remember that. It is never too late.